So I'd just like to introduce Claire Wicher, who's going to speak about enriching the computer science curriculum. She's happy to take questions at the end of the talk, so we will allow some time for that.
Fab, thank you. Can you hear me at the back? Great, 'cause I hate using microphones. This was a talk I originally did at Birmingham CAS conference earlier in the year, and I've expanded upon it. So as the original talk took 50 minutes and I added more on, I have condensed it in some respects, so hopefully the timings will be okay. First, a little bit about who I am. I have a degree in psychology and criminology. I then managed a nightclub in Halifax until someone burnt it down on Christmas Day. I then spent 9 years working in debt collection, including 2 of those knocking on doors in Brighouse. But I taught myself to code because I was bored and I wanted to learn something new. And that took me to volunteering at things like code clubs and kids events to help them, and I also worked a little bit with adults. From there, I discovered that there was not enough support for adults who want to learn how to code. So I made a thing. So I developed Code Up UK, which is like an adult version of Code Club. You can come along once a month for free, learn how to code. We ran in Manchester, and we now have 14 locations across the north of the UK and 3 in Brazil, which was a bit of an accident, but kind of cool. That led me, my volunteer work and everything I did in the community got me a job at the UK's most active makerspace in Manchester. So I worked there for 2 years managing their space, but I also developed and delivered their programming and digital skills courses across Greater Manchester. And it was there that I developed a passion for teaching. So thankfully I had enough in my bank to now apply and get on to do a PGCE in secondary computer science, despite my complete lack of formal training. I really enjoyed it and qualified last year, and I've just started my first NQT position at MEA Central in Manchester. So I'm now a proper teacher. I'm qualified to do my job. So we're looking at enriching the computer science curriculum. But what's the problem? So the UK has a huge digital skills shortage. A new curriculum was introduced in 2014 to address that balance. And the impact was assessed 4 years later. But the number of students opting for GCSE and A-level computing is lower than it was for those that used to opt for ICT. The gender gaps got bigger. Students were reported to find the subject boring and repetitive, which was exactly what they said about ICT, and it's why it was changed. And in September 2017, it was reported that 54% of schools didn't even offer computer science at GCSE. Reasons could be because of the lack of qualified teachers or a lack of students opting for the subject. So to me, this is a bit of a crisis. How are we going to address the UK digital skills shortage if we're not training up the next generation as a workforce? So this talk's going to talk about getting anyone into computing, but there's also a slight side focus on girls. And I just want to address the fact of why. So some people say that girls aren't interested in computing, and that should be okay. So if you're not interested in the subject, you shouldn't be forced to take it. And in some ways, that's right, but in some ways, it's wrong. Because in industry, we are creating digital solutions for all of society. We can't successfully create digital solutions for all of society if all of society is not represented in the team developing those products. If anyone was just in Alex's talk, he touched on a few things that were really interesting about how GitHub will not allow you to change your name ever, and that's a lifelong legacy of all the commits that you've done. Whereas if you've got married and changed your name, if you're trans and changed your name, that's something really important that you might want to change. So if they'd had those people represented in the team that developed that product, then perhaps it would be more usable for those people. We have similar situations a lot in health apps. So there are health apps that don't allow you to track menstruation, or they do, but they won't allow you to have a period that lasts more than 7 days, which doesn't work for everyone. I doubt those teams that develop those solutions have many women on them. So even though girls might not be interested in computing now, that's causing us a problem. So we need to get them interested. Why is this happening? We have a reported lack of confidence from teachers Many ICT teachers were forced to switch from ICT to computing. That's like asking a PE teacher to teach biology. A lot of people outside the industry don't understand the difference between the two subjects and how vast that is. So we need to support our teachers to switch. Schools don't know the difference between computing and ICT. So if you're an ICT or a computing teacher in a school, your head teacher probably doesn't understand what you've just switched from and what you've switched to. Happens a lot, and that misconception means it's really difficult to explain it to the students. Low timetabling priority. Do I have any teachers? Does anyone get twice a week?
For
Computing.
which year group?
Key stage 3.
No.
Twice a week. Sorry, once a week.
Yeah.
Once a fortnight. I have once a fortnight for year 7s, twice a fortnight for year 8s. How am I supposed to get through the curriculum and show them all the good stuff, because the curriculum still needs a little bit of work, and get them interested to take that GCSE option? And we don't have the time to do it. Poor allocation in options. Many schools will push E-back, but will not recognise computing as an option under sciences, so it gets put in the last bucket. And a lot of students have reported a huge issue between choosing between computing and the arts, especially girls. So girls would often want to do both, but will opt for arts over computing because they have enough tech and academic in the first lot of brackets, and they don't want to lose that creative option. Whereas that sounds stupid because computing is actually quite creative, we just don't push that side of it enough. So having poor allocation options means we're dropping those off that might otherwise take it if it was perhaps presented a little bit better for them. All that leads to poor uptake, so we have low numbers of students opting for GCSE computing. Not only do we have low numbers of students, but the numbers of girls is absolutely pitiful. And we're not getting brilliant results. That kind of links back to schools that don't understand what computing is, how difficult it is, not supporting the teachers. All of these things lead to not necessarily getting great results. So it's kind of this really bad cycle that we're stuck in that we have a really difficult job of getting out of. So what do we need to do? First, we need to get the students on board. We need to get them excited about our subject. We need to increase the number of female students opting to take the subject. This is something we don't have a choice in. Also, I should put in there ethnic minority females as well, because my school is 90-95% Muslim, so we need to see them represented just as much as the white girls.
And working class boys.
And working class boys. Everyone, we want everyone. Massively diverse group of people. So we need to give the students something to get excited about. That I can help you with. We need to give the school something to brag about. Hopefully that we can help you with. And we want to do it with minimal effort, because as teachers we have enough to do as it stands. So my original talk actually focused on a lot of the first thing I'm going to show you, and I'm going to do it really, really quick, because otherwise I could spend an hour telling you about all the amazing initiatives that you could use. Instead I'm going to cheat. I'm going to show you pictures of them all. I'm going to promise I'll put a list of them online with all the details you need, in depth for every single one at some point, basically on my 4-hour train journey home later. This will be what I'm doing as well as playing Lemmings. So I'll give you my Twitter handle at the end, you can follow that, and I'll give you a list and it will have in-depth information. But basically this is a bunch of initiatives that are ready to go. You need to do very little other than perhaps registering on the website and printing off a couple of resources. So these are perfect for things like after-school clubs, and they're fun and they're interesting, and it gets you away from having to teach people the difference between RAM and ROM and what a CPU does, and it's something more fun so you can get all the engaging things in. As much as we like to do this in our lessons, our poor timetable allocation doesn't allow us to fit much of this in. So these are really easy ways of injecting a bit more fun into our lessons. So I promise I will put full details of those up. It's also worth adding that some of these do girl-only versions of what they offer. So Cyber First, specifically, do competitions and events for young people. They also do ones that are just for girls. These are really good because it gives girls that safe space to explore and not be overshadowed by boys, which we know sometimes can happen in our school environments. It's also worth noting that some people kind of don't like girl-only events because of the segregation. One thing worth mentioning is having girl-only events doesn't take anything away from boys. These are not events that used to be mixed-gendered that someone might actually know, let's now kick out the boys and just do this for girls. These are events that are organised on top of mixed-gendered events, just for girls.
STEMettes.
STEMettes, yes.
Amazing.
They do amazing things. So there's nothing being taken away from boys, these are extra events. I think one thing we're potentially missing then is gateway events. So we get girls to girl only events and they feel super confident, but then we need to integrate them into those mixed gendered events. I think there's a little bit of work to be done there, but we have some solutions that are working really well, and hopefully I have a chance to go over those later. Next thing I want to cover is the environment your students are exposed to. We have to stop with stereotypes. Research has been done to say that people can make decisions on whether or not to join a group based solely on exposure to that group's environment. Neutral classrooms were reported to have no effect on participation from boys, but were preferred by girls. So you need to swap your Star Wars posters and video games references for nature posters and potted plants. Yes, it has nothing to do with computing, but it's taking it away from that geek stereotype that some girls find harmful. And this is taking it back to the issue of why are girls not interested in computing in the first place? Perhaps it's because they've not had a nice exposure to the subject. Their first instance of coming into computing is it's geeky, it's Star Wars, it's Lego. Not every girl will like that. So we need to create a more neutral environment to let girls have the opportunity, and some boys, to discover the subject in a more neutral setting and realise the content might be for them. It's not all about the culture, because that culture needs to change. So I took this and started doing some work implementing this into my classroom, but I had to give it a bit of a techie twist. So I took my nature posters and potted plants and swapped those for Google Deep Dream Neural Network artwork and a 3D printed Bulbasaur plant pot with a microbit that flashes when it needs watering. So the focus is art and plant, but there's a talking point that has tech involved in there as well. And actually, I've only been there for 2 weeks, but these have already started some conversations and seem to work. The girls like the pictures on the wall, even though they're weird and they don't know what they are. And the boys think that my 3D printed Bulbasaur is fantastic. If you want to do this, I will give you a word of warning. Make sure your microbit sensor is set up and fully working before you buy your plant, because mine's already dead. Because I bought my plant and then I set up my sensor, then I broke my sensor and then I didn't have time to fix it, so I didn't water it because it didn't flash at me. And yeah, sensor first, then plant. But this is just a really limited start, and it's already created an environment that's caused talking points on different sides of technology, and it's created a nice environment in my classroom. So I'm currently looking for other things where the focus is not the tech, it's nice and neutral and pretty, but I might be able to hide some tech in there. So if anyone has any ideas, please let me know. We're going to move on to perceptions. So I found a research study in 2014 where the UK public was surveyed on attitudes to scientists, including computer scientists and engineers. Most saw traits such as good communication, being creative and being interesting as not important when carrying out these roles. Not only does this enforce harmful stereotypes, but this view was actually really prevalent in young adults and even more so in the girls versus the boys. Now, I will admit the youngest age group in this survey was 16 to 17, but I think it's still quite reflective because we form our opinions quite early on. So we need to change these perceptions of what it is to be a computer scientist. And there's a few ways that we can do this. So being unable to identify with existing computer scientists can reduce a person's sense of belonging. Role models, in my opinion, need to be relevant, interesting and look like me. This was something that Kat Lamming touched on yesterday in her talk, where she did a whole thing on stereotypes, and I just want to take it that one step further. So not only do they need to be relevant, by relevant I mean Ada Lovelace was awesome and all that, but do my kids care what happened to a woman who died 160 years ago? No. Are they interesting? Now, I did a call out on Twitter a few weeks ago for people to send me people who fit my criteria. And what I got was hundreds of awesome people, and actually a lot of young people. And I thought these people were so cool. But that's because I'm a computer scientist and I work in computer science and I think all that stuff is really cool. What we want to hit are the kids that don't think it's cool. So we almost don't want that super geeky kids that want to be astronauts and are doing awesome things, because that's not cool to a standard 11-year-old. What's cool to a standard 11-year-old is a stupid robot that slaps you on the head to wake you up in the morning, because it's funny. So that brought me to Simone Gertz. Simone Gertz is an American who makes, I don't know if I'm allowed to say it, shit robots. Sorry, code of conduct. But that is what they're called. She makes really funny robots that do really stupid things, but they're really technically proficient, and she puts videos on YouTube. She swears a lot, but there are, I've been told, kid-friendly versions of the videos. If you're going to show them in school, just please watch them first and make sure you've got the right one. But I'm thinking, now I'm getting somewhere. Now I'm finding someone who would actually appeal to the people who aren't already interested in robotics, because they'll laugh, they'll think it's fun, they'll think it's cool. I also found, I don't know if anyone's seen this picture that's gone all over social media in the last few weeks. This is a lady called Lindsay, I'm really sorry I forgot my last name. She's a Victoria's Secret model who also programs. Or as I prefer to say, she's a programmer who also models for Victoria's Secret. Because this Instagram account put her up as like an inspirational woman, saying, this Victoria's Secret model can program code in Python, C++, Java, make some Object-C. And the comments were exactly what you would expect. I think the top one was, I bet she can print Hello World. And actually it was really good because she saw this and she responded to it saying, well actually I have 27,461 points on Stack Overflow, and basically listed her credentials, which are really impressive. And even though she's Victoria's Secret model, if you Google her, the images are actually okay for Key Stage 3. There's much more of her than lingerie, so it's not too bad. We can use her. She's a fantastic example. And she's going to appeal to your girly girls who don't think that coding is for them. And then I got stuck. I found quite a lot of white women, which I will hopefully publish a list of at some point. People point out Rhianna Pratchett, who writes for video games. People who do 3D printed cosplay costumes, so there's costuming, there's wearables in there. There's Rachel Kanitra-Kitty, who's here this weekend, who has fantastic cat ears that light up. Great, fantastic, I've got loads of people. But as I said, my school's 90 to 95% Muslim. So they're not people like my students. And this is where I hit a roadblock. So my mission at the moment is diversity in terms of ethnicity, to bring those new role models in. If anyone has any, please let me know. I started by looking at games developers because I have a lot of students. I actually have a lot of female students who play Fortnite and Overwatch. So I went and tried to look up who developed those games. And I admit I might not have got all of them because it's Google image search and I find what names I can find and they're all white men.
I believe the chief officer of Google DeepMind is a Muslim.
The chief officer of
Google DeepMind.
Google DeepMind. Oh, I should look at that, thank you. So I branched out to the highest grossing video games of the last 2 years because I thought if it's a big name game, that's going to have a bigger impact. All white men. I think I found 2 Japanese men. And then I got stuck. So this is an ongoing project for me to try and find some more people who hit all those 3 criteria. So that's a work in progress. But I think it's something that's really important that we need to find. We also need to address, is it worth it? As part of the same survey, only a small proportion of young people aged 16 to 17 were aware of the positive contributions engineers make to society. That means that we as teachers need to take focus away from the code and towards its purpose. There's no point writing programs on your computer in your classroom if the kids don't understand why they're doing it and what it can lead to. We need to provide code projects with meaning and value. If you look at young people and say, what do you want to be when you grow up, and split the results by gender, Your boys want to be firefighters, policemen, astronauts, all these exciting things. Girls, things that come top of the list are doctor, nurse, teacher. It's more caring roles, the ones that add value to society and do something really, really good. So we need to show them that they can do that with code. So we can get away from the boring Python and do interesting things. This is an example of the Raspberry Pi project where it's an infrared bird cam. So you're looking at nature, you're looking at getting involved in the outdoors. We've got apps for good. This is from one of the hackathons that I've volunteered at, where projects are quite often things like build something that helps people who are lonely. It's always got a purpose and something that's useful for society. So it's taking those skills and applying them for good things. So the key thinking points for this talk are: inject some fun into your curriculum with ready-to-go after-school and enrichment activities. Neutralise classrooms and strive for a welcoming environment over geeky references. Provide relevant role models who look like your students. I admit I've not been massively helpful with that because I've got stuck, but we will get there. And promote the why as well as the how when approaching digital solutions. Thank you. Questions?
Okay, so open for questions, yes.
You go back to the slide where you've got all the places where you can go for resources. So, I've got issues with the IDEA award.
Yes?
There's not enough teaching time for Key Stage 3 to implement computer science. There should be a focus on computational thinking. The IDEA award is on everything without much thinking involved in it. And some of it, the questions do not develop an in-depth mindset.
This is to be seen as extra. This isn't to replace your curriculum.
Yeah.
Because we've still got to teach what's on the curriculum. This is extra because it's presented
But
in a slightly more fun way.
Schools in the country, they are using this and they are losing teaching time and they're not teaching computer science effectively to encourage students to take it at Key Stage 4.
Well,
there needs to be a focus
that's on them to fix that.
But it's got to happen at a national level, and there must be a curriculum given out to schools which is going to support them with a positive framework for teaching.
Okay, thank you. What?
I'm not sure.
I guess what's your question for Claire in that? I understand what your background.
What is computer science? What are the strands that must be taught? How do you make it positive for students? And I don't think a lot of those...
Those aren't to replace the curriculum. We've got the curriculum, we've got the curriculum from the government. That's up to us to teachers to implement in our lessons. These are things that you can run extra. So I run these as after-school clubs.
But you couldn't run cyber discovery without having good programming skills.
Yes, you can. Because it's designed for older kids who will already have covered the basics, and it teaches you to program as part of the course.
Okay, thank you for your question. Thank you for answering it. Any other questions around the room? I'm sure Claire will have a discussion with you later if you want to.
I promise I will put a post up with all these things on my 4-hour journey home, and I will go into depth where you can get resources and where they are. I do have my Twitter handle on that slide, and I will tweet that up later, and I will also tweet new role models that I find that fit my really strict criteria, and if you have any, please send them to me.
Any other questions through the room? Yes.
Yeah. Oh, you're talking about the nice, useful things you can do with meaning in society, and you're talking about the role models. I think I mentioned this with Kat the other day as well. Is there some scope to be doing more to promote the projects that can be done, as well as the people who are doing them?
Well, yes,
to help make that.
That's my whole thing about promoting why we're coding, not just what the code is. First Python lessons tend to be a wall of text saying, hello world, my name is, input name, that sort of thing. It's great for learning the skills, but why does someone want to know how to do this? What can they do with that? And even though there are lots of jobs that you can go into with programming, we need to be mindful of which jobs we're pushing to give a broad spectrum. So we don't want to push people who think that programming is only for games development or for app development or to make a website, because some of these solutions have a lot of meaning in society. There are solutions being developed to help people with Alzheimer's, all sorts of kind of care in the community, the acts for good. Those are the things that we need to be making sure we highlight as well.
Okay, so you're highlighting those kind of projects as well as the role models.
So you
There's-
want to
there's
learn to
people behind
code
it.
because you can do awesome things that help society with it.
Okay, thank you. Any other? Yes, just here.
So, do you think it's important, so when kids are learning Python, it's important to use projects that are more engaging? So, I've just started GCSE computer science and I found that a lot of the kids are switching off because we're just doing the basic inputs and print hello world stuff. Do you think it's important to maybe show them more of the interactive projects?
Yes, I teach programming project-based rather than concept-based. So I take like the code club model where I show them a working thing and then we make it and then we talk about how it works, break it, change it, see what happens, and we learn concepts within it. I hate having walls of Python text and random outputs by the end of a lesson because I don't think that's going to get us anywhere. I also only have one lesson fortnight, so I have to be quick.
Thank you. Any further questions? Yes.
So is that GCSE level you've got one lesson a fortnight?
No, sorry, I'm in a new school, so we only have Key Stage 3 at the moment because it's only been in existence for 2 years. So I have one a fortnight for Year 7 and 2 a fortnight for Year 8. I don't know what my GCSE allocation will be yet. That's probably an argument I'll be having next year.
Anyone? I'll just see if there are any others then. I'll come back to you if that's okay. Anybody else got a question they wanted to ask? Claire? Yes.
So you talked about gateway events and things, so you start with lots of female only and very
Yes.
female specific, and I think, you know, being involved in Manchester Girl Geeks, one of the problems we have is getting people to go to other events. What do you think would be an effect in that?
Yes, so it's an ongoing problem. Everyone has it. A lot of people who organise events for girls see the same girls over and over and over again, but you cannot get them then to a mixed gendered version of the same event. I don't have a solution, but we've noticed something working quite well in Manchester at the moment. Les will tell you we've been running, well, Les has been running code camps, and they're structured days with lots of workshops on different things, so things like microbit AI, build a drone. They have a reasonable attendance from girls who have usually come from a girls-only event, and they like it because of the structure, because structure gives them confidence. Once they've got confidence with the basic skills, we then get them to the hackathons. If they jump from all girls straight to a hackathon, it's too much and they feel overwhelmed. But having those code camps that are slightly more structured in the middle, where they are supported and given ideas that they can take to a hackathon, we found that they're doing better and enjoying it more. So that's something that we're looking to explore in Manchester as a support to get more girls through. I can't guarantee it's going to work in the long run, but it's something we found might work.
Any other questions? Sorry, I think we've probably got time for one final question if you
Yeah,
want.
my question would be, should ICT be taken out of the national curriculum
No.
altogether? Because there isn't enough time.
Can
No,
I
we
actually
shouldn't. So do you want to set up?
sneak a question in at the end as well? Do you think that we also need to communicate better to parents? Speaking to parent of an A-level computer science student, because a lot of parents who don't necessarily work in computer science don't necessarily understand some of the subtleties, so they may be discouraging children as well from.
I think it could help, but ultimately that's something that's going to happen gradually. I think gradually we're getting away from the negative stereotypes. As younger people now have been exposed to it more in education, they're going to become the parents soon, so I think we'll naturally see that. I also think it's going to be quite difficult to get parents to understand hugely technical things.
Personal hat on there. Thank you. Sorry,
Lovely, I shall get out of here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.